Homeless black boy saves Elon Musk's son. The ending will shock you. These words alone spark emotion and mystery. Today you will meet Jamir, a young boy who, despite living in the shadows of Los Angeles streets, carries a light within him capable of changing lives. On what seemed like an ordinary day, his courage thrusts him into a situation no one could have foreseen, saving the son of one of the most powerful men in the world. But can an act of bravery truly alter someone's destiny? Jamir will face not only society's judgment, but also his own doubts about his worth and place in the world. Will he be able to prove that even those from the humblest beginnings can reach the stars? This is yet another captivating story from Living Narratives, where you feel the true emotion of stories that make you reflect deeply on life. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to keep exploring narratives that touch your heart and challenge your mind. The faint hum of city life buzzed in the background as Jamir pushed his rickety cart down the uneven sidewalks of Los Angeles. The wheels squeaked under the weight of salvaged scraps, bits of metal, broken appliances, and whatever odds and ends he'd managed to scavenge that day. At just 14 years old, Jamir had learned to navigate the harsh streets with the precision of someone far older. Every alley, every shortcut, and every danger was etched in his memory, each one a thread in the fabric of his survival. His hoodie, worn and too large for his slender frame, hung loosely over his head, shadowing eyes that carried both the sharpness of intelligence and the weight of hardship. He passed the neon-lit storefronts, the glowing signs casting shifting colors on the damp pavement. Somewhere in the distance, a car honked, followed by the faint murmur of music spilling out from a nearby club. Jamir paid it no mind. His focus was on the task at hand, another night, another hunt for discarded treasures that could be transformed into something useful or sold for a few dollars. The library had closed hours ago, and he still felt the faint imprint of the desk where he'd spent hours sketching. In his pocket was a folded piece of paper worn from constant handling. On it were rough diagrams of inventions, small machines he dreamed of building someday. They were more than just drawings. They were his escape, his proof that he was capable of something greater than the streets he called home. He turned a corner into a narrow alley, the dim streetlights flickering overhead. The air smelled of damp concrete and garbage, but Jamir didn't flinch. He had grown accustomed to the city's underbelly, where everything felt sharp and unyielding. Yet tonight something felt different, a tension he couldn't quite place. Then he heard it, a shout, sharp and panicked, followed by the sound of hurried footsteps. Jamir froze, his senses on high alert. He pressed himself against the brick wall, peering cautiously around the corner. His breath hitched at the sight before him. Two men, their faces obscured by hats and masks, were closing in on a boy no older than himself. The boy, dressed in clothes that screamed wealth, designer sneakers, a tailored jacket, backed away, his hands raised in a futile attempt to reason with his pursuers. Jamir couldn't make out their words, but the menace in their tone was unmistakable. One of the men brandished a knife, its blade catching the faint light. The boy tripped over a loose piece of debris, falling hard onto the ground. "I told you I don't have it!" he shouted, his voice trembling but defiant. Jamir's mind raced. He didn't know who this boy was or why he was being targeted, but the fear in his voice struck a chord. Jamir's instincts told him to turn away, to keep moving, and not involve himself in someone else's trouble. But as he watched the boy struggle to get up, something inside him snapped. Without thinking, Jamir grabbed the first thing within reach, a rusted pipe lying by a dumpster. The weight of it felt unfamiliar in his hands, but he gripped it tightly, his knuckles white. He took a deep breath and stepped into the alley. "Hey!" he shouted, his voice echoing off the walls. The men turned, startled by the interruption. Jamir didn't give them time to react. He swung the pipe against a nearby trash can, the loud clang reverberating like a gunshot. "Leave him alone!" Jamir shouted, his voice steadier than he felt. The boy on the ground looked up, his wide eyes meeting Jamir's. The men exchanged glances, momentarily thrown off. "Who the hell are you?" one of them barked, taking a step toward Jamir. Jamir didn't answer. Instead, he moved closer, his movements deliberate, trying to mask the trembling in his hands. "You don't want to do this," he said, his voice low but firm. For a moment, the men hesitated, calculating their odds. Then, one of them muttered something under his breath, grabbing the other's arm. "Let's go. Not worth it." They retreated, their footsteps fading into the night. Jamir exhaled shakily, lowering the pipe. "Are you okay?" he asked, stepping toward the boy, who was still sitting on the ground. The boy nodded, his expression a mix of gratitude and shock. "Yeah, I think so. Thanks." Jamir extended a hand, helping him to his feet. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said, his tone more matter-of-fact than scolding. The boy gave a weak laugh. "Yeah, I figured." "Ill that out?" He hesitated, then added, "I'm Damien, by the way." Jamir nodded but didn't offer his name. "You need to get out of here," he said simply, already turning to leave. "Wait!" Damien called after him. "At least let me—" But Jamir was already gone, disappearing into the shadows as quickly as he had appeared. Damien stood there for a moment, staring at the spot where his unexpected savior had been. As Jamir walked away, the adrenaline began to wear off, replaced by a dull ache of exhaustion. He shoved the pipe back into the cart and resumed pushing it, his pace quicker now. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. But as he reached into his pocket to retrieve his sketches, his fingers brushed against something unfamiliar. Pulling it out, he realized it was a phone. Damien's phone. He must have dropped it during the scuffle. Jamir stared at the screen, the lock screen displaying a name and a message notification. Elon Musk. The name meant nothing to Jamir, but he felt an inexplicable heaviness in his chest. With a quiet sigh, he slipped the phone back into his pocket and kept moving. The streets stretched endlessly before him, each step carrying him further into the unknown. The next morning, the sun rose reluctantly over Los Angeles, casting its golden rays on a city that never truly slept. In a quiet corner of the downtown library, Jamir sat hunched over a table, his fingers deftly working on a small mechanical device made from scavenged parts. His cart, now tucked discreetly in a shadowed alley outside, held the rest of his makeshift tools. For a few stolen hours each morning, this library became his refuge, a place where he could dream without the interruptions of survival. But today, his concentration faltered. His thoughts kept drifting back to the previous night, to Elon Musk and the near-disastrous confrontation in the alley. Jamir couldn't shake the image of Damien's terrified face or the sound of his voice trembling as he tried to reason with his pursuers. And then there was the phone, Damien's phone, now burning a metaphorical hole in Jamir's pocket. He pulled it out, the sleek device looking strangely out of place in his hands. The screen lit up as he turned it over, displaying Damien's name along with several missed calls. Most were from an unknown number, but one was marked simply as Dad. Jamir hesitated, his thumb hovering over the screen. He didn't know much about Elon Musk other than what he'd picked up from news snippets and the occasional documentary playing in the electronics store windows. To Jamir, he was just another name tied to wealth and privilege, a world so far removed from his own, it might as well have been another planet. Before he could decide what to do, the phone buzzed in his hand. The sudden vibration startled him, and he nearly dropped it. A call was coming in. "Dad!" flashed across the screen again, the name almost commanding an answer. Jamir's instinct screamed to ignore it, to toss the phone into the nearest trash can and pretend he'd never found it. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the memory of Damien's gratitude, or the nagging sense that this might be bigger than him. Reluctantly, he swiped to answer. "Damien?" The voice on the other end was calm, but carried an unmistakable edge of urgency. No," Jamir replied, his own voice cautious. "I found this phone. I think it belongs to your son." There was a beat of silence, just long enough for Jamir to wonder if the call had disconnected. Then the voice returned, sharper now. "Who is this? Where's Damien? Is he safe?" He's fine," Jamir said quickly. I helped him last night. Some guys were after him, but I got him away. He's safe now, I think." Another pause, longer this time. "Where are you?" the man asked. Jamir hesitated. "I'm not trying to cause trouble," he said. "I just wanted to let you know he's okay. I found the phone, and I thought you'd want it back." "I appreciate that," the man said, his tone softening slightly. "Listen, can we meet? I want to thank you personally. Name a place, and I'll send someone to pick you up." Jamir's grip tightened on the phone. The idea of meeting someone like Elon Musk, or his representatives, felt like stepping into a spotlight he wasn't prepared for. "I don't think that's a good idea," he said finally. "Just tell Damien to be more careful." He ended the call before Musk could reply, his heart pounding as he set the phone down on the table. Minutes passed, but Jamir couldn't focus. The library felt smaller, the air heavier, as if the walls themselves were closing in. Finally, he grabbed the phone and left, slipping into the labyrinth of streets where he felt most at home. Meanwhile, across the city, Elon Musk sat in his office, the phone call replaying in his mind. The boy's voice had been young, yet firm, carrying an undertone of resolve that intrigued him. Musk's assistant stood nearby, her tablet in hand. "Find him," Musk said simply. "Sir?" The boy said he didn't want to be found. Musk turned to her, his gaze unwavering. "I don't care what he said. That boy saved Damien's life. I owe him. Find him." Back on the streets, Jamir wandered aimlessly, the phone still clutched tightly in his hand. He felt a strange mix of relief and unease. He had done the right thing, hadn't he? Returning the phone, ensuring Damien was safe. It was enough. But the weight of Musk's voice lingered, a reminder that his actions had set something in motion, something he couldn't quite predict. He turned down an alley, pausing to adjust the tarp covering his cart. As he worked, a sleek black car pulled to a stop at the curb, its tinted windows glinting in the sunlight. Jamir froze as the driver's side door opened and a man in a sharp suit stepped out. "Jamir?" the man asked, his voice polite but firm. Jamir's breath caught. He didn't answer. The man smiled, holding up a hand as if to show he meant no harm. "Mr. Musk would like to meet you," he said. "He's waiting nearby. It won't take long." Jamir's mind raced. This was the moment he'd been dreading, the moment when his quiet existence intersected with a world he didn't understand. He wanted to run, to disappear into the maze of streets that had always been his sanctuary, but something stopped him. "Why does he want to meet me?" Jamir asked, his voice guarded. The man's smile widened. "He wants to thank you for saving his son, that's all." Jamir hesitated, his fingers tightening around the edge of the tarp. After a long moment, he nodded. "Okay," he said softly, "but just for a minute." The man opened the car door, gesturing for Jamir to step inside. As the boy climbed into the back seat, his heart pounding, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change forever. As the car pulled away, the streets of Los Angeles faded into the distance, replaced by the looming skyline of a world Jamir had only ever seen from afar. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to hope, just a little, that maybe, this time, it would be different. The car glided through the bustling streets of Los Angeles, its tinted windows shielding Jamir from the curious eyes of pedestrians. He sat stiffly in the plush leather seat, his fingers tracing the frayed edges of his hoodie. Every so often his gaze darted toward the driver, who remained silent and focused, a quiet enigma. The boy's thoughts raced as they approached their destination. Why had Musk insisted on meeting him? What could a man like him possibly want from a street kid? The car came to a smooth stop in front of a towering glass building, its sharp edges reflecting the afternoon. Son. Jamir stepped out hesitantly, his worn sneakers contrasting sharply with the pristine marble steps leading to the entrance. The man in the suit gestured for Jamir to follow, and together they entered the building. The air inside was cool and smelled faintly of cedar, a stark contrast to the dusty streets Jamir knew so well. They took an elevator to the top floor, its walls made entirely of glass, offering a breathtaking view of the sprawling city below. Jamir tried to keep his nerves in check, but the grandeur of it all was overwhelming. When the elevator doors opened, Elon Musk stood, waiting, his figure silhouetted against the expansive window behind him. "Jamir," Musk said, stepping forward with a warm smile. "Thank you for coming." Jamir nodded, his eyes narrowing slightly. "I didn't have much of a choice." Musk chuckled softly, motioning for Jamir to sit on one of the sleek chairs near a conference table. "I appreciate your caution," he said. "You've been through a lot, but I wanted to meet the person who saved my son's life. That was courageous." Jamir sat, but kept his posture guarded. "I just did what anyone would have done," he said quietly, his voice tinged with skepticism. "No, you didn't," Musk replied firmly, his tone shifting. "Plenty of people would have walked away. You didn't. That makes you different." There was a pause as Musk studied Jamir, noting the boy's wary expression and the way his hands fidgeted with the edge of his hoodie. "Damien told me." "Damien told about you," Musk continued. "He said you talked about building things, that you're good with your hands." Jamir's eyes flicked up, a spark of curiosity breaking through his guarded demeanor. "Yeah, I like to tinker," he admitted. "But it's nothing fancy, just stuff I find lying around." Musk leaned forward, his voice dropping slightly as if sharing a secret. "You remind me of myself when I was younger, hungry to create, to understand how things work. But I had opportunities that you didn't, and I'd like to change that." Jamir's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "I want to give you a chance," Musk said simply. "A chance to see what you're capable of when you have the right tools, the right environment. I'd like you to visit one of my labs, work alongside my team for a day, no strings attached, just a chance to show us what you can do." Jamir stared at him, his mind racing. The offer sounded too good to be true. A chance to work in a real lab, to use materials he'd only dreamed of. But then the doubts crept in. What if it was a trick? What if Musk had some hidden agenda? "Why would you do that for me?" Jamir asked, his voice edged with suspicion. Musk's expression softened. "Because I believe talent can come from anywhere," he said. "And because I owe you for saving my son." Jamir hesitated, his instincts screaming to say no, to walk away and return to the life he knew. But there was a small part of him, the part that spent hours sketching designs in a battered notebook, that wanted to believe this could be real. "Okay," Jamir said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'll try." Musk smiled, extending a hand. "That's all I ask." As Jamir shook Musk's hand, a strange feeling settled over him, a mix of hope and fear, like standing at the edge of a vast unknown. He didn't trust Musk completely, but for the first time in years, he felt like he had something to gain. Later, as he sat in the back seat of the car taking him back to the streets he called home, Jamir stared out the window, his thoughts a whirlwind of possibilities. He didn't know what awaited him at the lab, or if this opportunity would change anything at all. But deep down, he knew one thing: he couldn't afford to let fear hold him back. When the car stopped at the corner of his usual alley, Jamir climbed out, clutching a business card Musk had handed him. "Call if you have any questions," Musk had said. Jamir doubted he'd use it, but he tucked it into his pocket anyway. The city buzzed around him as he made his way back to his makeshift workshop. For the first time in a long time, Jamir allowed himself to imagine a future beyond survival, a future where his dreams might actually matter. The sun barely peeked over the skyline when Jamir stood at the corner where the sleek black car was set to pick him up. He gripped his worn backpack tightly, his fingers trembling with a mix of anticipation and doubt. The alley he called home stretched behind him, familiar in its chaos and comfort, while the world ahead felt impossibly vast. He glanced at the card Elon Musk had given him, the bold logo of SpaceX etched into its surface, a reminder of the opportunity he still wasn't sure he should trust. The car arrived, its polished exterior gleaming under the early morning light. Jamir slid into the back seat, avoiding eye contact with the driver. The ride was silent, punctuated only by the distant hum of the city waking up. As they approached the sprawling SpaceX campus, Jamir's heart raced. Towering buildings of glass and steel loomed ahead, each one buzzing with energy and purpose. It was nothing like the world he knew. Inside the main building, a woman in a sharp blazer greeted him. Her professional demeanor softened slightly as she said, "Welcome, Jamir. Mr. Musk is expecting you." Jamir nodded, his voice caught somewhere between awe and hesitation. He followed her through. Corridors lined with futuristic models, glowing monitors, and engineers huddled over intricate designs. Every step deepened his sense of both excitement and unease. This place was a different universe, and he couldn't help but feel out of place. When they reached a conference room, Elon Musk stood, waiting with a small team of engineers. His smile was genuine, but Jamir caught the subtle scrutiny in the eyes of the others. Musk extended a hand, and Jamir shook it hesitantly. "Glad you could make it," Musk said warmly. "Are you ready to show us what you can do?" Jamir shrugged, trying to mask his nerves, I guess. The group moved to a workshop area, a space alive with the hum of machinery and the glow of screens. Musk gestured toward a table filled with components, wires, circuits, small motors, everything Jamir had only dreamed of having access to. His eyes widened as he took it all in, his hands instinctively reaching for a circuit board. "You have 2 hours," Musk said, his tone casual but expectant. "Show us what you've got." Jamir hesitated for a moment, then got to work. His fingers moved with surprising confidence, piecing together wires and components like a puzzle he'd solved 1,000 times before. The engineers exchanged skeptical glances at first, but those soon turned into raised eyebrows and quiet murmurs as they watched Jamir's creation take shape. He barely noticed the time passing. In his world of scavenged parts and makeshift tools, every project had been a struggle. Here, with everything at his fingertips, the process felt almost magical. By the end of the 2 hours, Jamir stepped back, revealing a small but functional robotic arm, its movement smooth and precise. One of the engineers leaned in, inspecting the device with surprise. "He did this in 2 hours, using basic components?" Musk grinned, clearly impressed. "Not bad, Jamir. Not bad at all." Jamir looked down at his creation, a mix of pride and disbelief washing over him. "It's nothing fancy," he said, his voice subdued. "Just something I've been thinking about." "It's more than that," Musk replied. "It's innovative, resourceful, and it shows potential." The other engineers began asking Jamir questions, their skepticism melting into genuine curiosity. How had he learned to do this? What inspired him? Jamir answered cautiously, explaining how he'd taught himself by watching online videos at the library and experimenting with scraps he found on the streets. His voice grew steadier with each response, the confidence he rarely felt creeping in. As the visit came to an end, Musk pulled Jamir aside. "I wasn't expecting this," Musk admitted. "You're not just talented, you're extraordinary. But talent like yours needs more than recognition. It needs nurturing." Jamir stared at him, unsure of what to say. He'd spent his life surviving, not thriving. The idea that someone believed in him, really believed, felt foreign. "I want to offer you something," Musk continued, "a chance to work with us, to learn and grow. No obligations, no expectations, just an opportunity to see where your talent can take you." Jamir's heart raced. It was everything he'd ever dreamed of, yet he hesitated. This world was so far removed from his own. Could he really belong here? "I'll think about it," Jamir said finally, his voice quiet but firm. Musk nodded, respect gleaming in his eyes. Take your time, but know this. Whatever decision you make, you've already proven that you belong here. As Jamir rode back to the city, the weight of the day pressed on him. The robotic arm he'd built sat in his lap, a tangible reminder of the possibilities Musk had opened. But the streets he called home loomed ahead, pulling him back to a world that had never offered him such hope. For the first time in years, Jamir allowed himself to imagine a future that wasn't defined by survival, but by potential. He wasn't sure what his next step would be, but for the first time, the path ahead didn't feel entirely out of reach. The evening cast a golden glow over the city as Jamir sat on the edge of his makeshift bed in the corner of the abandoned building he called home. The dim light from a small lantern flickered against the walls, dancing shadows that seemed to mirror the uncertainty swirling in his mind. In his hands, he held the robotic arm he had built earlier that day, turning it over and inspecting every detail. It was a physical manifestation of his skills, yet it felt like a relic of a world he wasn't sure he belonged in. A soft knock echoed from the entrance of the building. Startled, Jamir grabbed a wrench for protection before approaching cautiously. To his surprise, standing in the doorway was Elon Musk, dressed casually with a guarded yet warm expression. Behind him, a black SUV idled quietly, its driver waiting patiently. "You've got an interesting place here," Musk remarked, glancing at the scattered tools, makeshift workbench, and piles of salvaged electronics. "What are you doing here?" Jamir asked, his tone equal parts suspicion and curiosity. Musk stepped inside, hands in his pockets. "I came to talk. I realized our earlier conversation might not have been enough to convince you." Jamir gestured to a crate, silently offering Musk a seat. As the billionaire lowered himself onto it, the stark contrast between their worlds became glaringly apparent. One man used to luxury and innovation, the other surviving on scraps and determination. "I don't want charity," Jamir said, firmly before Musk could speak. "If that's what this is about, you're wasting your time." Musk smiled faintly. "That's not why I'm here. I don't see you as someone in need of handouts, Jamir. I see you as someone with untapped potential, and I want to offer you a chance, not because I pity you, but because I believe in what you can do." Jamir remained silent, his eyes narrowing slightly as he studied Musk's expression, searching for any trace of insincerity. "Come work with us," Musk continued, "not as a charity case, but as a contributor. You'll learn from some of the best engineers in the world. And who knows, maybe you'll teach us something too." Jamir let out a dry laugh, shaking his head. "You think people like me just walk into places like SpaceX? They'll never see me as anything but some kid from the streets." "That's the world talking," Musk replied. "Not you. Don't let it define what you're capable of. You've already proven you belong." Jamir hesitated, the weight of Musk's words settling heavily on his shoulders. The offer was tempting, too tempting. But he couldn't shake the doubt that clawed at his resolve. Could he really step into a world so far removed from everything he knew? What if he failed? What if the weight of expectation crushed him? "I need time," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "To think." Musk nodded, respecting the hesitation. "Take all the time you need, but let me leave you with this." He pulled a sleek envelope from his pocket and placed it on the workbench. "This isn't just about you. It's about what you can bring to the table and how you can inspire others like you. Think about it." As Musk stood to leave, Jamir's voice stopped him. "Why do you care? You don't know me. You could have walked away after Damien was safe." Musk turned back, his expression serious. "Because someone once gave me a chance when I didn't deserve it, and it changed everything. Maybe it's my turn to pay it forward." The words lingered in the air long after Musk exited. Jamir sat alone in the flickering light, staring at the envelope. Inside, he knew, was an opportunity that could alter the course of his life forever. But the decision wasn't just about him. It was about stepping into a world that might never fully accept him, and proving that he deserved to be there anyway. That night, as the city buzzed with distant activity, Jamir lay awake, the envelope clutched in his hand. Doubt and hope wrestled within him, each vying for control. And for the first time in years, the future felt less like a burden and more like a question only he could answer. The following morning, Jamir stood at the gates of the massive SpaceX facility, its towering structures gleaming under the California sun. His heart pounded as he clutched the letter Musk had left for him, the official invitation that granted him entry into a world he had only dreamed of. Dressed in his best, though still a patchwork of second-hand items, Jamir felt the weight of every skeptical glance from the security personnel and staff passing by. A young woman approached him with a warm smile, holding a tablet. "You must be Jamir. I'm Elena, part of Mr. Musk's team. He's waiting for you. Inside, follow me." Jamir nodded, his nerves tangled with a flicker of excitement. As they walked through the sprawling campus, every corner of the facility seemed alive with innovation. Engineers bustled about, holographic screens projected complex designs, and robotic arms assembled components. With seamless precision, it was a symphony of technology, and Jamir was captivated. "You'll be joining a tour of one of our production lines before meeting Mr. Musk," Elena explained as they entered a vast assembly area. The hum of machinery filled the air, and Jamir's eyes darted from one marvel to the next. A group of engineers was gathered around a prototype engine, their animated discussion peppered with jargon Jamir barely recognized, but instinctively understood. His fingers twitched, yearning to touch the machines, to decode the mysteries of their creation. "Go ahead," Elena encouraged, noticing his fascination. "They won't bite." Hesitant, Jamir approached the group. One engineer, an older man with sharp eyes and a skeptical expression, glanced at him. "And you are?" "I'm Jamir," he stammered, his voice faltering. "I'm here as a guest." The man's gaze flicked to Elena, then back to Jamir. "Guest, huh? Well, let's see if the guest knows his way around tech. What do you think of this setup?" He gestured to the engine, his tone laced with challenge. Jamir hesitated only for a moment before stepping closer, studying the design with a furrowed brow. The intricacy was staggering, but he noticed something others might have missed, a minor misalignment in the components. Pointing it out, he explained how it could impact the engine's efficiency and suggested a tweak to correct it. The engineers exchanged glances, their initial doubt melting into mild astonishment. "Not bad," the older man admitted grudgingly. "Not bad at all." Eleanor beamed with pride, leading Jamir away as whispers about the boy spread among the staff. They reached a sleek conference room where Musk stood, reviewing holographic models on a massive screen. Turning, he greeted Jamir with a nod. "How was the tour?" Musk asked, his voice casual but curious. "Incredible," Jamir replied, his awe still evident, "but I don't think I belong here." Musk raised an eyebrow. "You just outsmarted one of our senior engineers in 5 minutes. I'd say you belong more than most." Jamir shrugged, still unconvinced. "It's one thing to point out problems. It's another to build something that matters." Musk leaned forward, his tone serious. "That's why you're here. To learn, to build, to prove to yourself what you're capable of. But it's not just about you, Jamir. It's about the people you can inspire, the kid out there who sees you and thinks, if he can do it, so can I." The words resonated deeply, striking a chord Jamir hadn't realized was there. Musk handed him a small badge with his name on it, the SpaceX logo etched below. "This is just the beginning. Are you ready to take the next step?" Jamir stared at the badge, the weight of the moment sinking in. "I don't know if I'll succeed," he admitted honestly. Musk smiled. "None of us do, but the only failure is not trying." As Jamir left the facility that day, his mind buzzed with possibilities. The world he had glimpsed was nothing like the streets he had known, but it was a world he now dared to believe could be his. For the first time in a long while, hope felt like more than a dream. It felt like a choice. The calm didn't last long. Within days, the story of Jamir, a homeless teenager invited to the prestigious SpaceX facility, exploded across media platforms. Headlines ranged from praise for Musk's apparent philanthropy to biting critiques accusing him of exploiting a vulnerable boy for publicity. News channels hosted heated debates, with panelists analyzing every detail of Jamir's life, from his makeshift workshop to his brief encounter with Musk. For Jamir, the sudden spotlight was overwhelming. Strangers in expensive suits showed up at the corners he frequented, shoving microphones in his face and shouting questions. "Jamir, how does it feel to be Elon Musk's project? Is this a real opportunity, or are you just a PR stunt?" He tried to avoid them, but they seemed to multiply daily. Back in his small corner of the city, Jamir felt the weight of their words. At first, he had been proud of what he'd achieved at SpaceX, but now every step forward felt like it carried 1,000 eyes watching, waiting for him to fail. Even the people in his community, those who once nodded at him with quiet respect, began whispering behind his back. "Guess he's too good for us now," one man muttered to another as Jamir passed by. "He's just a kid," another voice responded, softer but still audible. "Musk will drop him the second it's inconvenient." Jamir clenched his fists, forcing himself to keep walking. The doubt and mistrust stung, but he couldn't let it break him, not when he had worked so hard to prove he was more than just a boy from the streets. Meanwhile, Musk faced his own firestorm. At board meetings, executives questioned his decision to bring Jamir into the public eye. "This is a distraction," one board member argued, his voice sharp. "We're trying to launch a new phase of Mars colonization, and all anyone can talk about is this kid." Musk, unshaken, replied calmly, "If this company can't handle the weight of giving one person a chance, then maybe we shouldn't be leading humanity into the future." The tension in the room was palpable, but Musk refused to back down. He doubled down on his decision, stating publicly that Jamir was not a publicity stunt, but a symbol of untapped potential in every corner of society. For every critic, there were also supporters. Social media buzzed with messages of encouragement for Jamir. "You've got this, kid," one post read, accompanied by a photo of the SpaceX badge he had been given. Others started campaigns calling on major companies to support talented youth from underserved communities. Jamir's name became a rallying cry, a symbol of what could be achieved when barriers were broken. Still, the pressure took its toll. One night, as Jamir worked on a project in his workshop, Elon Musk appeared, ducking under the low-hanging sheet metal that served as a door. "You're all over the news," Damien said, handing Jamir a bag of takeout. "Figured you could use some food." Jamir set down his tools, glancing at Damien warily. "I didn't ask for this, you know. I didn't ask for any of it." "I know," Damien replied, sitting cross-legged on the floor. "Neither did I when I was born into this circus, but you're handling it better than I ever did." Jamir let out a bitter laugh. "Yeah, sure. Everyone thinks I'm some charity case or a scam, even the people I thought had my back." "Then prove them wrong," Damien said simply. "Show them why Musk believes in you, why I believe in you." The words hung in the air as Jamir stared at the half-finished device in front of him. It was a prototype he had been tinkering with, a solar-powered generator designed to provide affordable energy for his neighborhood. It was far from perfect, but it was his. For the first time in weeks, he felt a spark of determination reignite. Over the next few days, Jamir threw himself into his work, ignoring the noise around him. He refined his design, pouring every ounce of knowledge he had into making it functional. Musk, noticing the boy's renewed focus, gave him access to more resources and mentorship, quietly supporting him from behind the scenes. When the day finally came to unveil Jamir's project at a community event sponsored by SpaceX, the tension was electric. Cameras flashed, reporters crowded around, and the hum of whispered skepticism filled the air. Jamir stepped onto the makeshift stage, clutching the small generator in his hands. Taking a deep breath, he spoke into the microphone. "I know what Some of you are thinking, he began, his voice steady but firm, that I don't belong here, that this is just a stunt. But this, he held up the generator, is proof that where you come from doesn't define where you can go. The crowd erupted into applause as Jamir demonstrated how his invention worked, powering lights and devices with nothing but the sun. For the first time, the noise of doubt was drowned out by the sound of belief. People began to see him not as a project or a charity case, but as a young man with a future as bright as the dreams he refused to give up on. The community event showcasing Jamir's solar-powered generator should have been the crowning achievement of his young life. The crowd's applause, the wide-eyed admiration from local children, and even the reluctant nods of approval from seasoned engineers at SpaceX filled him with pride. But as the event drew to a close, the familiar weight of doubt began to creep in again. He could feel it in the sideways glances, the quiet murmurs just beneath the noise of celebration. Among the crowd, a journalist pushed forward with a microphone, his tone sharp and loaded. "Jamir, how do you respond to critics who say this is all Musk's doing, that without his resources, none of this would have been possible?" Jamir froze, gripping the microphone tightly. His heart raced as he scanned the sea of faces, searching for something, someone, to ground him. Before he could find the words, Damien stepped forward, his expression fiery. "Critics love to talk," Damien said, his voice carrying across the crowd. "But Jamir's ideas are his own. He didn't just come up with this, he built it, with his hands, his mind, and his determination. Musk didn't give him talent, he gave him the chance to show it." The DSO crowd erupted in cheers, but Jamir barely heard them. Damien's words struck a chord deep within him. For all the struggles and scrutiny, he had reached a point where even the son of one of the world's most powerful men believed in him. It was both empowering and terrifying. As the event wrapped, Musk approached Jamir with a rare smile. "You handled yourself well today," he said, "but now comes the hard part." Jamir raised an eyebrow. "Harder than this?" Musk chuckled softly. "Much harder. You've shown the world what you can do, but now they're going to expect more. Every mistake will be magnified, every success dissected. The question is, are you ready for that?" Jamir didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked back at the generator, still glowing faintly under the stage lights. "I didn't come this far to stop now," he said quietly. Musk nodded. "Good, because I have something in mind for you." Over the next few weeks, Musk introduced Jamir to a new project, a collaboration aimed at developing low-cost, sustainable technology for underserved communities. It was ambitious, risky, and exactly the kind of challenge that lit a fire in Jamir's soul. But the opportunity came, with strings attached. Media scrutiny intensified, and detractors grew louder, accusing Musk of using Jamir as a token to deflect criticism of his company's practices. One day, as Jamir worked late in the SpaceX lab, he overheard two engineers talking in hushed tones. "He's smart, sure," one said, "but let's be real, this is all about PR. Musk needs a feel-good story, and the kid's just convenient." Jamir's hands tightened around the tool he was holding. He had heard whispers like this before, but now they cut deeper. Determined not to let doubt consume him, he threw himself into his work, determined to prove them wrong. As the project progressed, Jamir faced challenges that tested him in ways he never anticipated. He grappled with complex engineering problems, navigated tense meetings with skeptical executives, and fought to maintain his own sense of identity in a world that often saw him as a symbol rather than a person. Through it all, Damien remained a constant presence, offering encouragement and reminding Jamir that he wasn't alone in this journey. The turning point came during a critical presentation to investors. Jamir had spent weeks preparing, fine-tuning every detail of the proposal, but as he stood before the audience, he felt the familiar weight of imposter syndrome pressing down on him. Taking a deep breath, he began to speak, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "This project isn't just about technology," he said. "It's about people, people like people. The ones in my community who are full of potential but held back by circumstances beyond their control. I'm standing here today because someone gave me a chance, and now I'm asking you to do the same for them." The room fell silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Then, one by one, the investors began to nod. By the time Jamir finished, the room erupted in applause. As the meeting concluded, Musk approached Jamir with a rare look of pride. "You're not just building technology," he said. "You're building trust. That's harder than anything we'll ever do here." Jamir smiled, the first genuine smile he had felt in weeks. For the first time, he allowed himself to believe that he belonged, not just in the lab, but in the world he was helping to shape. Jamir sat in his small workshop at the SpaceX facility, staring at the prototype he'd been working on for weeks. The hum of the building faded into the background as his mind replayed the doubts, the whispers, the endless scrutiny. Despite his undeniable progress, he felt trapped under the weight of expectations. Outside the walls of this lab, the world was debating his value, his legitimacy, and even his future. The project's deadline loomed, and the tension among the team was palpable. The initiative to create sustainable, low-cost technology had gained global attention, but with it came intense pressure. Media outlets painted Jamir as either a prodigy or a pawn, and he found himself caught in the crossfire of opinions. Even the engineers who initially doubted him now watched his every move, some waiting for him to fail. Late one night, Musk entered the lab. He stood silently for a moment, observing Jamir hunched over his work, before finally speaking. "You're carrying too much," he said softly. Jamir looked up, startled. "I'm fine," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. Musk approached, his expression serious. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone. Not to me, not to them. You've already done more than anyone expected." Jamir shook his head, frustration bubbling to the surface. "It's not about proving myself. It's about making a difference. But no matter what I do, it's never enough for some people." Musk nodded, understanding the burden Jamir was describing. Making a difference isn't about winning everyone over. It's about staying true to your purpose, even when the world doesn't get it. The next morning, the pressure reached its peak. A leaked report suggested that Musk's involvement with Jamir was a calculated PR move. Critics demanded proof that Jamir's contributions were legitimate, and some even called for the project to be shut down. The news spread like wildfire, casting a shadow over the initiative. Damien burst into the lab, his face flushed with anger. "You're not going to let them do this to you, are you?" he demanded. "You've worked too hard to let these people tear you down." Jamir hesitated, his resolve shaken. "Maybe they're right," he said quietly. "Maybe I'm just here because of Musk." Damien grabbed Jamir by the shoulders, forcing him to meet his gaze. "You saved my life," he said fiercely. "Not Musk, not anyone else. You. And you've earned every bit of this opportunity. Don't let their ignorance make you forget that." Damien's words struck a chord, and Jamir felt a spark reignite within him. He turned back to the prototype, determination etched into his face. "Then let's finish this," he said. On the day of the final presentation, the pressure was unbearable. Investors, engineers, media, and even skeptics packed the auditorium, eager to see the results of the project. Jamir took the stage, his heart pounding. He glanced at Musk and Damien in the front row, their expressions filled with quiet encouragement. Taking a deep breath, Jamir began. "This isn't just a device," he said, holding up the prototype. "It's a symbol of what's possible when we invest in potential, no matter where it comes from." As he explained the technology, the audience began to lean forward. Captivated, he spoke, with passion and clarity, weaving his own story into the narrative of the project. By the time he finished, the room erupted into applause. After the presentation, an investor approached Jamir with an outstretched hand. "You've proven something today," he said. "Not just about the technology, but about yourself." Jamir smiled, a mix of pride and relief washing over him. For the first time, he felt the weight of expectations begin to lift. He had faced the doubts, the scrutiny, and the fear, and he had emerged stronger. Later that evening, as the team celebrated their success, Jamir stood by a window overlooking the city. Musk joined him, holding 2 glasses of sparkling water. "To your future," Musk said, raising his glass. Jamir clinked his glass against Musk's, a quiet smile on his face. "To our future," he replied, knowing that this was just the beginning of a journey that would change not only his life, but the lives of countless others. Months had passed since the presentation that changed Jamir's life. The project had launched successfully, garnering widespread acclaim and proving the skeptics wrong. The low-cost, sustainable technology developed by Jamir and the SpaceX team was being deployed in underserved communities worldwide. But while the world celebrated this achievement, Jamir remained grounded, focused on what truly mattered to him, making a difference. In a quiet neighborhood in Los Angeles, a newly refurbished community center buzzed with activity. Children gathered around tables covered with blueprints and small electronic components, their faces lighting up with excitement as they pieced together their inventions. At the center of the room stood Jamir, now 15, guiding a group of kids through a hands-on engineering workshop. His patience and enthusiasm were infectious, and the children hung on his every word. The community center, aptly named Dream Lab, was Jamir's vision brought to life. Funded by Musk's new initiative to support young innovators, it had become a safe haven for kids from tough neighborhoods to explore their creativity and learn skills that could shape their futures. For Jamir, it was a full-circle moment, giving others the opportunities he once thought were out of reach. One afternoon, Elon Musk walked into Dream Lab unannounced, carrying a box of supplies. Jamir greeted him with a grin. "You couldn't stay away, could you?" Damien laughed, setting the box on a table. "You're building something amazing here. I wanted to see it for myself." As they walked through the center, Damien noticed a wall filled with photographs and quotes from the kids who had participated in Jamir's programs. One quote caught his attention. "If Jamir can do it, maybe I can too." Damien turned to Jamir, his expression serious. "Do you realize how much you've inspired these kids?" Jamir shrugged modestly. "I'm just showing them what's possible. The rest is up to them." Meanwhile, Elon Musk observed quietly from a distance. He had seen many extraordinary things in his life, but watching Jamir thrive in his element was something else entirely. Musk approached Jamir as the kids dispersed for lunch. "You've done more here than I ever imagined," Musk said. "You've turned a chance into a movement." Jamir nodded, his gaze steady. "I'm just paying it forward. You gave me a platform, and now it's my turn to do the same for them." Musk handed Jamir a sealed envelope. "This is for you," he said. "It's an official offer to join a mentorship program at one of our top facilities. You'd be working with some of the brightest minds in the world, but it's your choice, no strings attached." Jamir hesitated, his mind racing. The opportunity was incredible, but his heart was rooted in the community he had built. "I need time to think about it," he said finally. "Take all the time you need," Musk replied. "Whatever you decide, you've already made an impact that will last far beyond any program." That evening, Jamir sat alone in the community center, the envelope still unopened on the table. He thought about everything that had brought him to this moment, the struggles, the doubts, the risks he'd taken to help Damien, and the faith that others had placed in him. The weight of his decision felt immense, but he knew it wasn't just about him anymore. The next morning, Jamir gathered the kids at Dream Lab for a meeting. He held up the envelope and explained what it contained. "This is a chance to learn and grow in ways I never imagined," he said. "But it also means stepping away from this place for a while." The kids looked at him with a mix of pride and sadness. One of them, a girl named Lila, raised her hand. "Will you come back?" she asked. Jamir knelt to meet her gaze. Always, he said. This place isn't just mine, it's ours, and I'll never stop working to make it better. The room erupted in cheers and applause, and Jamir felt a renewed sense of purpose. That evening, he called Musk and accepted the offer, with one condition: Dreamlab would continue to expand while he was away, ensuring that more kids could benefit from its programs. Months later, Jamir stood in the spotlight at an international conference on innovation. As he shared his story, the audience listened intently, moved by his journey from the streets of Los Angeles to becoming a beacon of hope for young dreamers around the world. He ended his speech with a simple yet powerful statement. Greatness isn't about where you come from, it's about what you do with the chances you're given. Back at Dreamlab, a new mural adorned the wall, a painting of Jamir standing among the stars, surrounded by children reaching for the same heights. Beneath it were the words, "Dream big, build bigger." For Jamir, the journey was far from over, but as he watched the next generation of dreamers take their first steps, he knew that the legacy he was building would shine brighter than any star. What lesson did this incredible story bring to you? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. If this narrative moved you, don't forget to subscribe to Living Narratives and give this video a like. Stories like this are crafted with care and dedication to inspire and touch your heart. Every subscription helps us continue bringing these powerful, life-changing stories to you. And don't forget to explore our other videos for more heartfelt narratives that will make you reflect and feel deeply. Thank you for being part of our community. See you next time.